Wool is walking Socha home. Wool takes a quick look around and compliments Sochu on his home. However, Sochu isn't used to anyone complimenting him and asks Wool if he's mocking him. Wool says his home is no different than a palace, and he then admits to living in a pit of snakes. Socha thinks Wool is making that up just to make him feel better. Wool then says he's leaving because he has somewhere to be. Sochu asks Wool where he's headed, and Wool asks if Sochu is usually interested in other people's business. Sochu chuckles and says Wool would have asked the same thing. Wool knows it's true and says there are some people who owe him. He was used, abandoned, and hunted. Sochu wants to know who they are and if Wool is going to take revenge. Wool says the Ching-Chong Sect, the Emmy Sect, and the sects who support them. Socha can't believe it and says that's insane. He then asks Wool if he's trying to wage a war against the full force of Sichuan by himself. I may be insane, Wool says. He then asks for the flying dagger he lent to Socha because he's going to need it. Oh, this piece of garbage? Socha asks. Wool says that's not garbage. He spent a pile of silver on it. Socha searches under his bed and says Wool will die pretty quickly if he thinks of taking revenge with this dagger. Socha throws Wool a weapon he had hidden under his bed and says, take this instead. Wool loves it, as the edge, balance, and durability are perfect. Wool asks Sochu if he had a hard time making it. Socha says he didn't have a hard time making it. He just didn't have a lot of time because he had to make it in secret. Wool asks Sochu if he's sure it's okay to take it. Socha says of course it is. The Ching-Chong Sect and the Emmy Sect are the reason why the ThunderClan fell to ruin. Socha says he can never forgive them for oppressing and alienating the noble ThunderClan until it's ruined. And besides, he says, Wool is the first person who told him not to endure it. Wool appreciates the kind gesture and begins testing out his new weapon. Wool has gotten used to the dagger quickly and Sochu is amazed. It's as if the flying blades are moving on their own. He has to remind himself that his eyes are not playing tricks on him. Wool says he's going to name his new weapon the Phantom Dagger. As Wool walks out the door, he gives Sochu his name. Socha says he'll pray for his success in Sichuan. Later on, in Chengdu, we see a woman holding a meeting. She gives her sincere gratitude to everyone who has gathered here today because of her call. The attendees say they're always prepared to stand together with Lady Wu. She says the 100 Flower Room's circumstances aren't that great due to the pressure from the Ching-Chong Sect, but she is relieved that everyone is doing their best to help. The men say they'll protect the 100 Flower Room no matter how powerful the Ching-Chong Sect is. They don't have the power all the way in Chengdu. They reassure Lady Wu that she doesn't have to worry about a thing. Lady Wu thanks them and thinks to herself, men are all the same, nothing but vulgar barbarians. Then she remembers the Emmy Sect has issued a summons since the Ching-Chong Sect has been moving in unusual ways. She tells the men at the table that she won't be able to attend the next meeting. The men eagerly ask if they can also join the Emmy Sect ranks. They even go as far as saying they would climb the Emmy Sect mountain. Lady Wu sheds tears of joy and thinks to herself that the men are only there because of her looks. She can take all the people who mistake her for a flower under her wing and manipulate them until the day she becomes the leader of the Emmy Sect and rules over Sichuan. The meeting ends as they walk down the stairs and Lady Wu sees a new face. She's intimidated by Wool's bright eyes and fair skin. Lady Wu decides to approach Wool and she says she's never seen him around here before. She introduces herself as Lady Wu from the 100 Flower Room and asks for Wool's name. He agrees and says his name is Wool. Lady Wu wants to know more and asks Wool if he's a martial artist. Wool tells her to think as she likes. Lady Wu doesn't appreciate Wool's cold response and asks why he won't tell her. Wool asks if she always acts so inquisitively when she meets someone for the first time. The men with Lady Wu don't appreciate Wool's tone and demand he apologize to her. Apologize? Wool asks. One of the men didn't catch Wool's vibe, and he tells Wool to get on his knees and formally apologize. If you don't, there will be consequences, he says. Wool gets out of his chair and says there's a limit to how blinded you can be by a woman. Shouldn't you assess your opponent before running rampant? Wool asks. The man gets angry as he doesn't want to be embarrassed in front of Lady Wu and calls for his sword. How dare you mock me? He asks Wool. The man instinctively goes for an attack on Wool, but Wool easily moves out of the way. The man is shocked that Wool dodged his attack so easily. He's now more angry as that's never happened before. The man prepares for another attack with the thunderstorm sword technique of the Clear Sky House. His comrades are afraid he's actually going to kill Wool. The man moves to strike Wool and once again Wool easily avoids the attack. The man can't believe Wool dodged his attack yet again and is left wondering who Wool is. The man again tries to avoid embarrassment and goes for an attack behind Wool's back. Wu easily avoids the man and walks up to Lady Wu. She is mesmerized by Wu's presence. Now that Wu is done moving, the man tries to sneak up on Wu with one last attack. Wu looks back at the man and asks if that's really the best he can do. Wu gets a hold of the man's chin with 2 fingers and slams him into the ground. Wu gets up to face Lady Wu and she asks him to release his anger. Lady Wu tells Wu that the man is not a bad person. She says he was aggressive because he was worried about her. Wu says people must always take responsibility for their actions. Lady Wu replies and says Wu is absolutely right and asks how she can take responsibility for the man. She throws Wu off with this response and he asks if she's really willing to take the responsibility for the man. The man's comrades beg her not to as they'd rather fight with their lives on the line. But Wu realizes what she's doing. She's getting full mileage out of what she has. Wu takes a long look at Lady Wu and he can't help but smirk. Lady Wu has shouldered the responsibility of that man from earlier. Lady Wu then asks Wu if he can do her a favor. She says it shouldn't be too difficult for him, considering how easily he beat up that man earlier. Wu says he needs to hear the favor first. Namhosen, she says. She wants Wu to kill Namhosen, the next in line of the ThunderClan. She says not long ago, the ThunderClan leader Tae Yun-ho proposed the marriage between her and Namhosen. They threatened them by saying they would aid the Qingchong sect if they refused the proposal, putting the 100 Flower Room and the Emi sect in a very difficult position. Because of him, Wu realizes. Because he has no contact with the 100 Flower Room, Lady Wu must have calculated that she can claim she doesn't know him if he fails. Lady Wu says if Wu kills Namhosen for her, she will put in a good word for him with her aunt and make sure he receives a sizable reward. Wu asks who her aunt is. Lady Wu says her aunt is one of the great disciples of the Emi sect leader Ran. She is the pavilion master Jianghu. Is that so? Wu asks with a smile. We are now brought to Mount Emi, where we see Runju and one of her comrades have arrived. The view from the mountain is amazing, but it's all meaningless if they lose to the Qingchong sect in the war. Runju and her comrade are visiting for a meeting with the Emi sect. This meeting will include Zhanghua Yang and the Abbess of 9 Calamities Ran. Ran cuts right to the chase and says there's no way a group of vagabonds would spill blood for free, so they must want something in exchange. Runju says she is correct, as they can't afford to suffer losses after all. Ren asks how much they want and Runju says they believe 500,000 gold yangs is fair. The Emi sect disciples are appalled and Ran has to calm them down. Ran asks Runju if she actually expects her offer to be accepted. Ran says she can hire multiple groups with that kind of money. Runju says that's true, but none of them will be as strong as the Blood Cloud Corps. Ran asks what if she still refuses. Runju says a member of their corps should have arrived at Mount Qingchong by now. You're trying both ways, Ran asks. The impertinence, she yells, as Runju and her comrade cough up blood. Ran wants them to be honest. She wants to know what the real offer is. Runju says they are vagabonds who sell their strength to the highest bidder. Our master will be the one who pays even 1 yang more, she says. Ran says Runju's corpse member must also be saying the same thing in Mount Qingchong. Ran believes the Qingchong sect is already superior to them, and if they hire the vagabonds as well, that'll give them a surefire victory. She wants to dismiss them, but she doesn't know when a conflict will break out, so she needs all the help she can get. Ran orders Zhanghua to go meet with the vagabonds to negotiate. We now see 2 men complaining about their business meeting with the ThunderClan. They're driving a bargain too hard, one of the men says. He says he's completely exhausted every time he does business with the clan. They wonder how much more the clan has to squeeze from them in order to be satisfied. They can't believe the clan is being so cheap when they have 2 full storage rooms of grains already. The rich are always like that, they say. And as always, watching them and plotting from afar is Wu, as he awaits the return of the Black Cloud Corps. Myung yawns. It's exhausting trying to walk on a tightrope between the Emi sect and the Qingchong sect. He believes it may be time to think about retirement once this is all over. Dayoshi finally returns and says he would have returned sooner, but he saw a familiar face. Dayoshi says he told Myung about him last time, the person they met by coincidence and traveled with along the way. The man named Wu. Myung says he remembers, and Dayoshi asks if that bothers him. Myung says for some reason it does bother him, but it may just be because of the situation they're in with the Qingchong sect and the Emi sect. Dayoshi says if Myung's senses have a bad feeling about it, it shouldn't be taken lightly. Dayoshi then says there are some 3 members that can tell him more, since he's curious about him as well. Myung says he thinks that's an excellent idea. Then, in come Runju with the disciples from the Emi sect. Myung welcomes Zhanghua and Yang. Merang asks if he can take the direct arrival of the great disciples of the Imi sect as confirmation that the Imi sect is willing to make a deal. Jianghu says if Merang is trying to deceive her sect with mediocre strength, they will make sure the Black Cloud Corps pays dearly, even if they have to postpone the war against the Qingchong sect. Merang smiles and invites them in. The negotiations begin, and Jianghu thinks Merang is crazy for wanting trading rights beyond the Great Wall. She says a vagabond should act like one and receive gold for payment. Jianghu tells Merang he is too greedy, but Merang doesn't think so. He says it's well within the realm of possibilities if the Imi sect becomes ruler of Sichuan. Jianghu is starting to get fed up with Merang and breaks the table. Jianghu can't contain her anger, as she knows Merang knows he has the advantage. Merang says in that case, he'll give up on the trading rights and he won't ask for the 500,000 gold yangs either. He says he won't even ask for compensation for the table and teacup Jianghu just broke. Merang asks if they can instead help them get settled near the Western Plateau. Jianghu asks if that's what Merang was aiming for from the start, a place to settle. Merang says, as you know, Jianghu, we are a group of vagabonds. No sect wants us to settle near them. Jianghu says the same goes for our sect. Merang says that is why he's suggesting they settle near the Western Plateau, far away from the Imi sect. You can allow something like that, can't you? He asks. Jianghu takes a second to think. She believes they are indispensable to them in the short run if she accepts, but they may become a burden in the future. However, if they use them as meat shields, their forces will dwindle and not much of them will be left. She thinks providing the few who remain a place to settle isn't difficult, and they can be disposed of when they become a problem. Very well then, we accept your proposal, Jianghu says. Negotiations are complete then, Merang says. Merang is excited, as he thinks things wouldn't have gone this well if he was negotiating with the Qingchong sect. Merang asks if they should write up a contract, but Jianghu says there's no need. They will uphold the proposal in the name of the Imi sect. Merang asks if they will now be headed back to the Imi sect. He offers them a room if they'd like to stay for a day. Jianghu says they will stay in the 100-flower room, as the young master there is her niece. Then, Runja barges in and says she has urgent news. Merang gets angry and asks how urgent could the news be for her to barge in like this. Runja says the young leader of the ThunderClan was assassinated. How was the assassin captured? Merang asks. Doesn't seem like it, and I think the ThunderClan is sure that this is the Qingchong sect's doing, Runja says. At the Qingchong sect, the ThunderClan leader Tay arrives unannounced. The Qingchong sect disciples have no idea what's going on, because the clan has come armed. The Qingchong sect leader meets with Tay and asks what's going on. Tay says he's come to ask him the same thing. The Qingchong sect leader says he needs to hear the full story as to why Tay has brought a coffin. Tay says inside this coffin is his disciple's corpse. The Qingchong sect leader offers his condolences and asks Tay what he thinks their sect has to do with it. Tay gets angry and asks if he truly doesn't understand. The sect leader says he truly doesn't understand and wants Tay to explain. Very well, in that case I will show you myself, Tay says. Inside the coffin is the young leader of the ThunderClan, Nam Hosen. Look at this boy's wounds, Tay says. They are no doubt the wounds from the Qingchong sect's 72 sword waves. The sect leader starts sweating, as they are indeed wounds from the 72 sword waves. Tay asks the sect leader if he will continue to make excuses after seeing the body. His disciple has clearly passed away due to the Qingchong sect's 72 sword waves, Tay says. The only possible explanation is that the culprit is the Qingchong sect. Tay thinks they must have realized they were planning on backing the Imi sect through matrimony with the 100-flower room. He's sure the Qingchong sect made their move first after realizing it. The sect leader begs Tay to calm down and says he will get to the bottom of this. But Tay asks how he can possibly stay calm when his disciple died from the Qingchong sect's sword technique. Here's the proof, he says. So what are you trying to get to the bottom of? Tay wants the Qingchong sect leader to explain himself this instant. Then, the Qingchong sect's greatest warrior has heard enough. How dare you act in such a way after coming to the Qingchong sect unannounced, he asks. He says this is unforgivable. He then rushes Tay and hits him with the thunderstorm palm. Do you find our sect that laughable to the point that you would try to persecute us with such an outrageous accusation, he asks. The sect leader is upset at the greatest warrior for the attack. The greatest warrior walks away and says they would only be a laughingstock if they gave them the attention. It's not too late to figure out what's going on after neutralizing them. The sect leader notices that his junior brother has changed. He has become violent and reckless. Though he was cold in the past, he was never that frenzied. As the disciples check up on him, Tay asks the sect leader if this was the aim of the Ching-Chong sect, to neutralize with force and suppress any form of objection. The Ching-Chong sect leader can't respond. He tells his junior brother to speak with Tay when he gets up and gives the ThunderClan warriors a place to stay as well. The Ching-Chong sect leader then tells his disciple Chung to head to Chengdu. Something is amiss there, and he wants to know what. Back in Chengdu, we see two men conversing in the hall. One wonders if the Ching-Chong sect really killed Nam Hosen. It's been said that traces of martial arts can be easily forged, but the other says the more superior the martial art is, the more distinct its traces are. Traces of a martial art like the 72 sword waves can't be imitated. It may actually be true then that the Ching-Chong sect are really to blame for Nam Hosen's death. They believe at this rate, a storm of blood may engulf the entirety of Chengdu. Little do they know, they just walked past the room of the real suspect. Will sits at his table. Lady Wu walks in and asks how he did it. Did what? Will asks. Young Lord Nam Hosen of the ThunderClan, she says. She asks Will what he did for the ThunderClan leader to be so furious and accuse the Ching-Chong sect of being the culprit. Will acts clueless and asks who knows. Lady Wu, confused, asks if he isn't the one who killed him. Why does it matter who the killer is? Will responds. He says what's more important is that he's dead, don't you think? Will asks. He grabs Lady Wu by the chin and leans in for a kiss. She says yes, you're right, but pulls away. She says it'll be hard for her to meet with him for a while, because she has received an important guest. Will asks who. Lady Wu says she told him before that the Emi sect's first disciple Jianghu is her aunt. She's come to the 100 Flower Room along with her junior sister. She has quite a fussy personality, so she has to attend to her personally. What is Jianghu doing in Chengdu? Will asks. Lady Wu says she heard that Jianghu is there to hire a vagabond group called the Blood Cloud Corps. She says she's heard they are quite powerful among the vagabond groups, and apparently their leader is very intelligent. Will asks Lady Wu when Jianghu will go back to the Emi sect. Lady Wu says she thinks she'll be staying in the 100 Flower Room for a while. It's a pleasure seeing her aunt, but having to see that junior sister of hers, who she can't stand the sight of, leaves a bitter feeling, she says. Lady Wu leaves, and Wu is left wondering if by Jianghu's junior sister, she meant young. She was cool-headed and menacing. He thinks he might see her again while staying in Chengdu. He's sure the Ching-Chong sect is in an uproar as well, now that Nam Hosen is dead. He says to himself he'll just have to wait a little longer. We're given a flashback of the 72 sword waves technique being activated and performed masterfully by Wu. The Ching-Chong sect disciples have arrived at the crime scene and are looking for clues. They are shocked to see that the traces without a doubt belong to their sect's technique. Chung wonders if this could have been done by an outsider. His comrade believes it could have been, but it's near impossible for an outsider to have learned a secret technique that only a select few have even learned within the sect. Chung says a transcript was leaked once, but the transcript only contained the sword movements. Chung's comrade says if they didn't learn their sect's cultivation technique, a single person wouldn't be able to bring out even half of its true power. Chung then asks if he thinks it was a sect. The Ching-Chong sect disciple says that would change things. They'd be able to create a cultivation technique by reverse engineering the movements. However, considering its efficiency, it'd be better to just create a new martial art at that point. They realize they won't be able to come to a conclusion and decide to figure out how the assassin infiltrated instead. As they're retracing the assassin's steps, Chung wonders if this could have been the assassin they saw 7 years ago. But then he shuts that idea down quickly because he's sure he's dead. They leave the scene and are headed to the inn for some rest. On their way to the inn, they run into the Emi sect. Both sects get riled up as they come face to face. Chung says, "It's been a while, Jianghu. What scraps have you come all the way here to nibble on?" Jianghu asks. They bicker for a moment, and then Young suggests they withdraw for now. Jianghu tells her to shut up as she doesn't want to turn tail to these Ching-Chang bastards. Did you kill the young leader of the ThunderClan while knowing he was going to be betrothed to the young leader of the 100 Flower Room? Jianghu asks. She then says she's impressed they've thrown their humanity away so easily. Chung says, like you're one to talk. You invested 7 years into killing your sect's most promising prospect. Young knew it would end up like this. She wonders where it all went wrong. She recalls they were the ones who started this, but they didn't actually think the assassin would kill Wugan. He's long dead, but we're still wrapped around his fingers, she thinks. She realizes she doesn't even know his name. Then she feels a cold gaze and wonders who it is, but she doesn't see anyone. She thinks she may have been mistaken. Her senses are as sharp as ever. Will says to himself, I needed an appropriate ember to light the fire of conflict, but quite the big shots have already gathered. It's not a bad start, he thinks to himself. Thank you for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed the recap. But the story is not over yet. There is more to come in the next chapter. So stay tuned and subscribe to my channel to find out what happens next. See you soon.